Welcome to Long Listen, a space for slow thinking in a fast world. This isn't a channel for quick summaries or surface level takeaways. Each episode is a deep dive into books that challenge how we think, how we live, and how we see ourselves, from psychology and philosophy to modern culture and timeless literature. Hey everyone, imagine this. What if the scariest part of 1984 isn't Big Brother staring down from the screens, but you, catching yourself scrolling through your feed, second-guessing everything? Yeah, I do that too. Hit post on a story, then delete it 5 minutes later because, what if it offends someone? That tiny spike of anxiety, the micro-pause before you share what you really think, feels so small, so harmless, almost normal. But sit with it for a second. Why are we so careful? Why do we rehearse every caption in our heads like we're defusing a bomb? We're talking about cancel culture's quiet grip, that self-censorship when you're DMing a crush or venting in a group chat, terrified of saying the wrong thing. It's not dramatic. No torture chambers, no loudspeakers blaring propaganda. It's way subtler. It's the way you reword a joke so it lands safer. The way you avoid certain topics at dinner because it's just not worth the fallout. The way you scroll, absorbing opinions until you're not even sure which ones are yours anymore. What if control doesn't look like chains, but like hesitation? That's where Orwell gets uncomfortable. Because when we think about 1984, we picture giant posters of Big Brother, telescreens watching every move, a brutal state crushing dissent. But look closer, and you start to notice something else. People in that world learn to monitor themselves. They don't just fear being watched. They internalize the gaze. And that's where it hits home. Because today, it's not about governments lurking in shadows. It's about us, policing our own thoughts in this hyper-connected mess. We curate ourselves for timelines. We soften our edges for algorithms. We weigh every word against potential backlash. The fear isn't that someone is forcing us to be silent. It's that we're choosing silence to stay safe. And that's what makes this conversation relevant. Not as a history lesson, not as a political rant, but as a mirror. So stick around. We're diving into Orwell's nightmare, but through the lens of your notifications, your DMs, your late-night overthinking after you hit send. Because maybe the most chilling part of 1984 isn't a dictator watching you from above. It's realizing you've been watching yourself the whole time. Sound familiar? All right, super quick plot speed run, no spoilers if you're new. Meet Winston Smith, a guy in a gray world ruled by the party where history gets airbrushed daily. He's not a hero with a secret master plan. He's not leading a rebellion. He's just tired in that quiet, internal way. He works at the Ministry of Truth, which sounds noble until you realize it's basically a factory for rewriting reality. Yesterday's newspapers, edited, wrong speeches, retroactively fixed, enemies switch sides overnight. Just tweak the archives. Boom, it was always like that. The Ministry of Truth isn't about truth at all. It's about narrative control, and Winston's job is to help manufacture it. Imagine waking up every day knowing your entire role is to delete inconvenient facts and replace them with something more convenient. Not just lying to people, but literally rewriting what they remember. That's the world he lives in. Then there's doublethink. This is where Orwell really messes with your head. Doublethink is the mental gymnastics of believing two opposites at once, like loving your job while hating every single shift, or preaching, live your truth, while quietly judging anyone who does it differently. It's holding a contradiction without feeling the tension. It's convincing yourself that black is white because that's what the party says today. Doublethink isn't stupidity. It's survival. And that's what makes it terrifying. People in Winston's world aren't clueless. They're adapting. They're bending their minds so they don't snap. And then there's Room 101. No graphic details, no spoilers, but just know this. It's not about generic torture devices. It's personal. It's tailored. It's the place where your deepest fear is weaponized against you. Not something abstract, something intimate. The thing that makes your stomach drop just thinking about it. Room 101 isn't about pain. It's about breaking your sense of self. Boom! Foundation set. That's the skeleton of the story. A man in a system that edits reality, trains citizens to embrace contradiction, and ultimately crushes individuality at its weakest psychological point. But here's why this hits different today. Because when we hear history gets rewritten, we don't picture dusty archives and red pens. We think about timelines, trending tabs, viral clips that get clipped again, stripped of context, reframed. One day, someone's a hero. The next day, they're a villain. Narratives flip in hours, and if you scroll long enough, it can feel like reality itself is unstable. Who said what? When? In what context? Does it even matter? When information moves fast enough, memory gets blurry. And that's where the Ministry of Truth feels less like a building and more like a feed. Doublethink feels less like a dystopian trick and more like a daily coping mechanism. You can hate hustle culture and still grind yourself into exhaustion. You can criticize social media while refreshing it every 5 minutes. You can say, be yourself, while carefully crafting a version of yourself that won't get you dragged. Two opposites, same brain, no explosion, and Room 101? Maybe today it isn't rats or darkness or whatever nightmare lives in Winston's world. Maybe it's irrelevant, public humiliation, being screenshotted and misunderstood in front of thousands. Maybe it's losing your digital tribe, because if there's one thing humans still fear deeply, it's exile. Not from a country, from a community. So yeah, Orwell's world looks extreme. Gray uniforms, giant posters, brutal slogans. Strip away the gray uniforms and giant posters, and what's left feels way too familiar. Truth that bends, memories that shift, and fear made just for you. And that's why this isn't just a classic you had to read in school. It's a psychological blueprint, and we're just getting started. The true gut punch of 1984 isn't tanks in the streets. It's reality quietly slipping away. Not with a bang, but with a single edit. Picture this. The party rewrites the past like it's a Google Doc edit history gone rogue. One day, you're absolutely sure the war is with East Asia. It's on posters. It's in speeches. You remember the hatred, the chants, the headlines. The next day, it's Eurasia. It has been in Eurasia. And if you hesitate and say, wait, wasn't it? Suddenly the problem isn't the party. It's you. Your memory is wrong. Fix it. Move on. The horror isn't that the past changes. It's that you're expected to change with it. That's what makes Orwell's vision so disturbing. The party doesn't just lie, it updates reality. Constantly, efficiently, confidently. And the citizens don't riot every time the narrative shifts. They adapt. Because survival means smoothing over the dissonance until it barely registers. Now zoom out and tell me, that doesn't feel familiar. We live inside a news cycle that refreshes every minute. Viral misinformation explodes across your For You page before breakfast. Edited clips twist politicians' words into something barely recognizable. A headline trends for 6 hours, dominates discourse, then vanishes like it never mattered. And somewhere in that churn, your certainty erodes. Did that really happen? Was that quote real? Or was it clipped, filtered, enhanced, dramatized? Remember that AI video of Barack Obama dropping F-bombs that went viral a few years back? It looked real. It sounded real. It was engineered to feel real. Chilling, right? Because if your eyes and ears can't be trusted, what's left? When technology can fabricate evidence, doubt becomes the default setting. In 1984, the Ministry of Truth physically altered newspapers and records. Today, the archive isn't paper, it's digital. And digital means editable, deletable, re-uploadable with a new spin. An old tweet resurfaces stripped of context. A clip is cut right before the clarifying sentence. An algorithm amplifies outrage because outrage keeps you scrolling. Nobody announces, "We are rewriting history." It just shifts. Quietly. And because it shifts so often, you start to feel less anchored, less sure. Orwell's warning wasn't just about authoritarian regimes. It was about the psychological consequences of unstable truth. If reality feels negotiable, your confidence in your own mind starts to fracture. Think about how often you've second-guessed yourself after reading conflicting threads on the same event. One side presents receipts, the other has screenshots. Both claim moral high ground. Both accuse the other of manipulation. Instead of clarity, you're left with fog. And that fog is powerful, because when you stop trusting your own eyes, you start looking for someone to tell you what's real. In 1984, that someone is Big Brother. In our world, it might be a favorite influencer, a news brand, a subreddit, a community that feels aligned with your identity. We outsource certainty. We subscribe to narratives, and once we're inside those narrative bubbles, anything outside of them feels suspicious. Familiar, right? Control doesn't require force when confusion does the work. Here's where it gets personal. Winston's rebellion begins with memory, with the stubborn sense that something is wrong, that he remembers a version of events the party insists never existed. That quiet resistance, "No, I remember," is radical in a system built on revision. But what happens when even memory feels unreliable? When your phone shows you one version of reality and someone else's phone shows them another? When your feed is customized so precisely that your truth and my truth barely overlap? That's the algorithm deciding what you see, what you don't, what deserves your outrage, what deserves your empathy. When your worldview is filtered, your sense of reality becomes personalized. And personalization sounds harmless, convenient even, until you realize it fragments shared reality. In Orwell's world, the party dictates a single official truth. In ours, we risk something equally destabilizing: thousands of parallel truths, each reinforced by engagement metrics, each defended by communities who feel absolutely certain they're right. So when someone says, "That never happened," they might not be lying. In their digital universe, it genuinely didn't. That's a different kind of dystopia. Not centralized oppression, but decentralized distortion. Not one voice shouting propaganda, but millions whispering competing versions of events. And in the middle of that noise, the average person just wants stability. Something solid, something consistent. Orwell, through the nightmare architecture of 1984, wasn't only critiquing a political system. He was dissecting a mental state, a society where people doubt their own memories, suppress their own questions, and accept contradictions because challenging them feels exhausting. The real dystopia isn't surveillance, it's epistemic fatigue, that bone-deep tiredness from trying to figure out what's real. When it's easier to shrug and say, "Who even knows anymore?" That shrug is dangerous, because once you stop caring about truth, it becomes incredibly easy for someone else to define it for you. And here's the uncomfortable question. What if your truth gets downgraded tomorrow? What if something you're certain about right now is reframed, debunked, recontextualized in a way that makes you look foolish for ever believing it? Would you fight for your memory? Or would you quietly adjust, retweet the correction, and move on? That's the psychological tension at the heart of George Orwell's warning. 1984 isn't just a dystopia coming, it's a headspace. A place where doubt corrodes conviction and narrative outruns reality. And if we're not careful, we're already living in that headspace without even noticing. Enter Newspeak, the party's vocab shrink ray in 1984, designed to boil language down to slogans so you can't even think of rebellion, let alone articulate it. The idea's brutally simple. Strip out words for tricky or rebellious ideas, and suddenly you can't even think them properly. No real word for freedom? Way harder to imagine it. No subtle gradations of meaning? No subtle gradations of dissent. Language becomes efficient, clipped, engineered. Fewer synonyms, fewer shades, fewer ways to even say, "This feels wrong." Control the vocabulary, and you quietly narrow the mind. That's the genius of Newspeak. It doesn't chain you. It limits the mental tools you'd use to pick the lock. Fast forward to now. We don't have a Ministry of Truth officially issuing a new dictionary every year. But we do have platforms that compress our thoughts into tight boxes. Twitter threads turning into 280-character rants. Reaction videos where nuance dies somewhere between the thumbnail and the comment section. TikTok hot takes are delivered in 30 seconds with subtitles racing across the screen. It's not evil by design. It's efficient, shareable, snackable. But when everything becomes bite-sized, something else gets trimmed. Complexity. We reduce layered arguments into W or L, entire political debates into red versus blue emojis. This is fine dog memes replacing full conversations about systemic burnout. It's funny, relatable, but also kind of revealing. When everything's shorthand, depth just becomes optional. I catch myself doing it too. Scrolling, reacting, dropping a fire emoji under a take I half agree with because I don't have the energy to unpack it properly. Or typing a quick, "This is insane," instead of explaining why something actually unsettles me. It feels harmless. Who even has the energy to drop a full essay in the comments these days? But that's exactly the point. Newspeak in Orwell's world wasn't about making people stupid. It was about making certain thoughts inconvenient. And today, long-form nuance often feels inconvenient. Slow thinking doesn't trend. Careful framing doesn't go viral. What travels fastest are extremes, jokes, outrage, and vibes. If attention is currency, nuance is expensive. We're simplifying discourse into emojis and hot takes. We respond to complex social issues with a GIF. We summarize existential dread with, "LOL, we're doomed." We meme our way through climate anxiety, economic instability, loneliness, and humor is powerful. It helps us cope. But I scroll sometimes and wonder, if we're all just memeing our way through life, can we still wrestle with the big questions? Does a sus GIF capture the weight of institutional mistrust? Does a crying, laughing emoji hold the texture of burnout? Or are we compressing feelings so tightly that they lose their edges? If you can't fully name a feeling, can you fully confront it? Orwell's fear was that without words like justice, liberty, or rebellion, people would lose the cognitive scaffolding to imagine alternatives. Today, the words still exist. Nobody's deleting them from the dictionary. But the space to use them thoughtfully feels crowded out. Algorithms reward punchy patience, decisive over exploratory, certainly over curious. And when conversations flatten into polarized slogans, you're nudged toward picking a side rather than exploring the gray. That gray space, the messy, uncomfortable middle, is where critical thinking lives. And it's also where engagement often drops. So we avoid it. Your turn. Ever caught yourself simplifying a deep feeling into a reaction face? Ever typed, "I'm fine," when you meant something far more complicated? That's not dystopia. That's modern life. But when it becomes habitual, when entire communities communicate primarily in shorthand and sarcasm, something shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, just gradually. The capacity for slow, difficult dialogue weakens. And that's when newspeak stops being a fictional language in a gray, totalitarian state and starts feeling like a cautionary mirror. Because maybe the real threat isn't someone stealing our words. It's us trading them away. For speed, virality, convenience. And what if we lose the exact vocab we'd need to fight back when it counts? Quick detour. Let's zoom out from 1984 for a second and ask a bigger question. How does Orwell's nightmare stack up against Brave New World by Aldous Huxley? Because if 1984 is the go-to word for dystopia, Brave New World is its sneakier, more seductive cousin. Orwell's world controls through pain, boots on necks, truth squads, surveillance. You step out of line, you disappear. Reality is forced on you at gunpoint. Huxley's world? No boots, no torture chambers needed. Control comes wrapped in comfort. Soma highs to smooth over discomfort. Feelies to keep you entertained. Designer babies engineered into social roles so nobody even imagines climbing out of their lane. In Orwell's universe, your mind is starved. In Huxley's, it's overfed. One regime terrifies you into obedience, the other seduces you into it. Think about that contrast for a second. In 1984, the party limits pleasure because pleasure creates private loyalty. Sex is regulated, joy is suspicious, independent thought is dangerous. The system thrives on fear and scarcity. In Brave New World, the system thrives on abundance, endless entertainment, casual sex stripped of emotional depth, chemical happiness on demand. People aren't beaten into submission. They're pacified, distracted, amused. If you're constantly stimulated, you rarely feel the need to rebel. Huxley understood something subtle. You don't have to suppress people if you can keep them comfortably numb. So which world are we living in? That's the question that always sparks debate. Are we in Orwell's gray, paranoid surveillance state? Or Huxley's neon-lit pleasure dome? Here's the uncomfortable answer. It feels like a remix. We doom-scroll outrage 1 minute, absorbing headlines that spike our cortisol, arguing in comment sections like truth soldiers. The next minute, we flip to Netflix, autoplay the next episode, and let the tension dissolve into binge-induced haze. We're pissed off 1 second, numb the next. Wired and zoned out at the same time. We're not just watched, we're entertained into submission. Look at your own habits. How often do you switch from reading something that genuinely angers you to watching something that distracts you? That oscillation is fascinating. It's like we can't sustain either fear or pleasure for too long. We need the mix. Orwell would recognize the fear side, the sense that you're being monitored, that every post is archived, that missteps have consequences. Huxley would recognize the pleasure side, infinite content, infinite scrolling, infinite ways to soothe discomfort. The algorithm doesn't need to threaten you with room 101. It just needs to know what keeps you engaged, and engagement doesn't require enlightenment. It requires stimulation. In Huxley's world, people willingly consume their sedation. They line up for soma. They attend feelies. They celebrate their own conditioning because it feels good. That's the twist. Nobody in Brave New World thinks they're oppressed. They think they're happy. Compare that to our culture of optimization and convenience. Food delivered in minutes. Shows streamed instantly. Personalized playlists predicting your mood. It's efficient, pleasurable, addictive. And while none of this is inherently dystopian, the pattern is worth noticing. When every discomfort can be instantly dulled, growth becomes optional. Reflection becomes optional. Resistance becomes optional. At the same time, Orwell's shadow lingers. Data tracking, targeted ads that feel a little too accurate, employers scanning social media, governments debating digital surveillance, there's still that underlying awareness. You're being observed, quantified, categorized. That constant low-key awareness makes you curate everything. Self-edit posts, think twice before hitting send. So we live in tension between two forces, fear and comfort, control through threat and control through pleasure. And the wild part? Both can coexist. You can feel anxious about the state of the world and still be too distracted to challenge it. So which hits closer for you? The whip or the candy? The anxiety of being watched or the comfort of being endlessly entertained? Maybe the real genius of our era isn't choosing one dystopia over the other. It's blending them. A system that spikes your outrage just enough to keep you engaged, then offers you a dopamine hit to calm you down. That rhythm keeps you scrolling, consuming, busy, angry one minute, amused the next. And as long as you're caught in it, you're rarely still enough to question the whole damn thing. And that's where Orwell and Huxley quietly shake hands across time. Let's talk about Room 101. In 1984, Room 101 isn't just torture, it's personal, tailored just for you. Not generic pain, not random punishment, your worst fear, weaponized. For Winston, that's the moment everything breaks, not from lack of courage, but because it hits straight at raw instinct. Survival, panic, the place where your rational mind collapses. Room 101 isn't about suffering, it's about surrender. It's where your principles evaporate under pressure. Now fast forward to today. We don't have secret police dragging us into underground cells. No ominous steel doors labeled with numbers. But the concept? It feels updated, subtler, psychological. What's the modern version of a room that holds your deepest fear? For a lot of us, it's social exile. It's the viral pile-on that turns you into tomorrow's meme. It's waking up to thousands of notifications, not of support, but of strangers dissecting you. It's getting clipped out of context, ratioed by thousands, and turned into tomorrow's punchline. Or maybe it's quieter than that. Maybe it's fading into irrelevance, watching your followers count flatlines, feeling like you shouted something meaningful into the void and heard nothing back. The genius of the system now? No dungeon needed. Think about how much of our behavior is shaped by that dread. The fear of being ghosted by your tribe. The fear of saying something that doesn't land and suddenly finding yourself outside the circle. Humans are wired for belonging. Evolution made exile feel like death because, once upon a time, it kind of was. So when digital culture threatens us with isolation, even symbolic isolation, our nervous systems react. Heart rate spikes, palms sweat. You post something real, something vulnerable, and then you wait. Refresh. Refresh again. Did people like it? Did they misunderstand it? Is someone already drafting a thread calling you out? I've felt it. That small, sharp anxiety after hitting share, wondering whether authenticity was worth the risk. In 1984, Room 101 forces Winston to betray what he loves most. It isolates him from his own convictions. Today, maybe Room 101 shows up as the moment you consider deleting a post, not because it's wrong, but because it's risky. The moment you soften your opinion to avoid backlash. The moment you choose silence over possible exile. Fear doesn't need chains, it just needs stakes. And social stakes are powerful. So here's the question. What's your Room 101? Is it public humiliation? Being misunderstood? Being ignored? Losing your community? Drop it in the comments. Not as a confession, but as recognition. Naming the fear is the first step to shrinking it. So let's normalize it, instead of acting like we're above it. Drop yours in the comments. What's your Room 101? Here's the raw truth. Winston doesn't crumble under fists or prison walls. He doesn't break because the party's brutal. He breaks because he's completely alone. No real allies, no community strong enough to anchor him. Just echoes in his own head, bouncing between doubt and fear. In 1984, isolation is the final weapon. The party doesn't just separate bodies, it severs bonds. It makes genuine trust nearly impossible. And once Winston stands alone with nothing but his own fragile convictions, it's only a matter of time. Dystopias don't win by force alone. They win by disconnecting people from each other. That part hits harder the older you get. Because think about our world. We are more connected than any generation before us. Constant notifications, group chats buzzing, feeds full of faces and opinions. And yet loneliness statistics keep climbing. Depth gets swapped for filters and streaks. We see what they ate for brunch, but never what's keeping them up at night. That's not evil design. It's drift. But drift matters. When relationships become surface level, support becomes fragile. And when support is fragile, fear becomes louder. Winston's tragedy isn't just that he rebels. It's that he rebels in isolation. His moments of intimacy are brief, fragile, constantly under threat. There's no real network to hold him up, no community solid enough to take the hit. And that's the warning that feels urgent today. When we trade depth for convenience, we weaken our resistance to anything that tries to control us. Because control thrives in silence, in fragmentation, in people feeling like they're the only ones who see the cracks. If you're creating deep content like this podcast, or even just consuming it, there's a quiet responsibility there. Not to become a lone truth warrior shouting into the void, but to connect, to build actual conversations beyond comment sections. DM a friend today, not with a meme, with a real thought. Share something slightly unfiltered. Risk a bit of awkward silence for something real. That's not cheesy advice, it's strategic. Systems, whether they're political, cultural, or algorithmic, have a harder time isolating people who are genuinely linked. Orwell wasn't warning us to heroically rebel alone in some dramatic cinematic showdown. He was showing what happens when someone tries to stand against distortion without solid human anchors. The antidote to dystopia isn't just awareness, it's connection. Before the silence wins, before self-doubt gets too loud, before fear convinces you to shrink, reach outward. Because the second we stop linking up, that's when any system, subtle or brutal, starts closing in. Wrapping up, take a beat. Seriously. Before you jump to the next tab, the next notification, the next dopamine hit, pause. Are you double-thinking your way through that group chat debate right now? Typing something bold, then deleting it because it might shift the vibe? Are you reshaping captions to fit the tone of your feed instead of your actual thoughts? Or do you genuinely feel like you own your headspace? That's the question Orwell leaves us with in 1984. Not, is there a dictator watching? But who controls the narrative inside your mind? The real battlefield isn't the screen in front of you. It's the space behind your eyes. 1984 isn't just fiction. It's not just a dusty school assignment or a political talking point people throw around online. It's a mirror, a psychological one. It reflects the way we adapt to pressure, how we smooth out contradictions, how we trade a little authenticity for a little safety. It asks whether we're remembering clearly or just accepting the latest update, whether we're speaking fully or compressing ourselves into slogans and reaction faces, and most importantly, whether we're connected enough to each other to resist isolation. If this sparked something, even a small discomfort, sit with that. That's the point. Awareness isn't about paranoia. It's about ownership. About noticing when you're self-editing out of fear versus choosing your words with intention. There's a difference. You can live in a hyper-connected world without surrendering your inner voice. But it takes effort, reflection, real conversations, less autopilot. Thanks for hanging with me through this deep dive. If this hit home, smash like, subscribe for more book chats that actually connect to real life, and drop your biggest takeaway below. I genuinely want to know, what's one thought you're reclaiming today? One belief you're choosing to examine instead of just absorbing? Let's make the comment section more than hot takes. Let's make it a space for actual thinking. Peace out. Stay real in this wild feed.